Hi everyone, we're going to show you how to velvet beef. And today what we're going to do, we've got a pound of beef. I'm going to split it in half and I'm going to do a shortcut velveting for half of the beef and then a water rinsing velveting for the other half. Then we're going to cook two separate beef and broccoli dishes and then we're going to have a taste test. When we first posted this on the blog, we felt that it was like a little bit of a secret, a Chinese restaurant secret. But the cat's out of the bag and it's been quite a few years since we posted it. Everybody knows how to velvet beef to a certain extent. But let me tell you, there's a lot of details with it that get lost in translation, and it can be confusing. So I'm gonna set the record straight today, show you what to do. First step is selecting your beef, and our go-to selection is flank steak. Flank steak has really come a long way. In the day, we used to use flank steak in the restaurant routinely, and it was actually a little bit of a inexpensive cut. It was kind of a value cut, I'll call it. For what you're getting, you weren't paying that much money. Today, you're paying a lot of money for a good piece of flank steak. Can you use London broil? Can you use eye round? Can you use filet mignon? Can you use sirloin? Of course you can. A ribeye steak, some people have used that. No question there, that's a high quality cut of beef. And you can even use chuck steak. Some are more expensive than others. Actually, I consider a flank steak a pretty high quality cut of meat. In fact, you have to check out our post on how to prepare beef for stir fry because it actually not only talks about velveting, but it talks about beef selection. And this is where velveting really shines. If you're using a London broil, if you're using a chuck steak that's a little bit less expensive. I've got about a pound of flank steak here because we have two types of velveting. There's the water rinsing velveting, which is what we used to do in the restaurant, and that's what was reserved for more tougher cuts of meat, in my opinion, and in our opinion back then, that's what we did. The shortcut method is reserved for a higher quality cut of meat, and the difference is the shortcut velveting is you add a little bit of baking soda into your marinade, and you don't have to wash it or rinse it off. Probably 90% of the time, I'll do that shortcut velveting. In the rinse method, after you first slice your beef, you put quite a bit of baking soda, more water, and then you let it marinate. It's not even marinate, you let it sort of absorb and tenderize. And then you'll rinse it off with water because that much amount of baking soda, you're gonna get that little baking soda taste. So velveting and marinating, I kind of consider as one. Did you know that when you actually don't use baking soda and you just use a little wine, oyster sauce or soy sauce, and a little bit of oil and water, and cornstarch, and you actually mix that together, that actually tenderizes your steak. It tenderizes the meat a bit. And adding that little tiny bit of baking soda puts it over the edge and it makes it even better. Two terms that have been thrown around are oil velveting and water velveting. So what are these terms? So oil velveting, in this case beef, is basically a velveted, marinated beef that is tossed in the oil and deep fried. And that's what most Chinese restaurants do. They toss it into the high heat oil, toss it around, scoop it up, and then they're ready for the next step for cooking the dish. Water velveting is the same case, although it's not used much for beef, it's used mostly for chicken or shrimp or pork, is velveted, marinated protein, blanched or poached in water instead of the oil. That's water velveting. In restaurants, a lot of times they'll put everything in oil velveting unless they're cooking more of a delicate dish. Here at the Walks of Life, we're home cooks, so we usually don't do any oil velveting. You got a lot of oil, you got to deep fry. What do you do with the oil afterwards? At a restaurant, they reuse the oil immediately, and they can do that. They can afford to do that. So for us here, in place of oil velveting, we sear the meat. And at home, I think that's probably good for you guys too. All right, all this talk about velveting is making my head spin, but a lot of good points that hopefully are useful to you at home. And today, what we're going to do, we've got a pound of beef, and I'm going to split it in half, and I'm going to do a shortcut velveting for half of the beef, one half, and then a water rinsing velveting for the other half. Then we're going to cook two separate beef and broccoli dishes, and then we're going to have a taste test. So let's get to it. Okay, let's cut this beef. You want to cut, which I've done this with these pieces, with the grain, and then you want to slice it against the grain. If you cut it with the grain, all of it, it's going to be tough because it's going to be stringy. So you want to cut across the muscle fibers. Now this little bit of a membrane too, if you like, you could remove that. But if you're going to slice it against the grain, it's not going to be that big a difference. So You want to make these about 1/4 inch slices. I've had this beef for a little while, so it's defrosted, but what you really want to do for ease of cutting is you want to have this a little frosty. So it's kind of not frozen solid, but a little bit firm. And it makes cutting a lot easier because right now you'll see that it's a little bit squishy. So this beef is a bit long. I'm going to cut it in half. So I'm going to cut it with the grain here. And you could tell these lines here was with the grain, right? And then now, this is kind of a narrow piece, right? So I can cut it like this to keep it narrow. But if I start cutting it at an angle, like so, you see now I've got a wider piece, right? I've divided these pound of beef into 2, and what I'm going to do is we're going to shortcut velvet this one, and we're going to water velvet this one. All right, so this is 8 ounces of beef. Got baking soda, shortcut method. Put about 1/8 of a teaspoon. About a teaspoon of oil. And the oil helps protect the protein from the searing. About a teaspoon of Shaoxing wine. A little oyster sauce. I prefer oyster sauce to soy sauce because it has a little bit of sugar and a little bit of MSG in it. Put about a teaspoon cornstarch. Last, but certainly not least, about a tablespoon of water. There you go. All right. So for me, I like using my hands. I'm just gonna. And you see already, right? There is no water in here. It has absorbed the water. And depending upon how dry your beef is, you might want to add a little bit more even. But you definitely don't want any standing liquid. There's no standing liquid here, as you can see, right? If you have standing liquid in here, don't worry about it. It'll absorb. Just mix it again. But if there's still standing liquid when you're ready to go to the wok, you don't want to add that liquid in there because it'll tend to stick more, okay? This is ready to go in about a half an hour. Now, can you leave this overnight? Of course you can. For this batch, we're going to use the water rinsing method. So the water rinsing method calls for a teaspoon for a pound. Now we've got about 8 ounces here, so we're going to use half a teaspoon. We're going to add water and massage it until most of the liquid is absorbed. So what you want to do though is make sure you massage this beef so that the baking soda is sort of uniform and absorbs every piece of beef. And look at this. Look at what has happened. I added about almost a 1/4 cup of water to this. And guess what? It's gone. There's nothing left in it. All this beef has drank all this water. We're going to leave this beef anywhere from half an hour to 1 to 2 hours. How long you tenderize is going to depend upon your cut of beef. If this is chuck steak, you want a full 1 to 2 hours. If you have this, what we have, this flank steak, probably 30 minutes and you're ready to go. And we're going to rinse it, and then we're going to marinate it. One point about velveting beef is adding egg whites. I get so many questions about adding egg whites, velveting anything. Egg whites are alkaline and they're water. So that's what they use. What we're doing here with baking soda is adding alkalinity. We're adding water, moisture to it, which kind of activates and helps the baking soda work and absorb into the meat. One thing about egg whites that I really don't like using is it adds a little bit egginess, and you can actually taste the egg. And it adds costs, and not to mention it's a little bit hassle. So it's kind of an old school method, and you really don't need it. So that's the deal on egg whites. Okay, it's actually been about an hour since we've added the baking soda to this beef. Time to rinse it off now. Rinse that baking soda off. Just gonna put it under the sink. So here we could stop it. I could pour some of this water off, which is loaded with the baking soda. Fill it up one more time to make sure we rinse it. Don't want the bitter beef. Okay, so we're ready now to pour this off. You actually want to make sure you get all this water out. These You might even have to squeeze some of this water out. Okay, and you see how plump the beef is now? Very nice. And we're gonna now marinate it. And you know what? There's still a little bit of water left here, and I actually want to get this excess water out, which will wreak havoc when we put it into the wok. So I'm gonna pour this water off first. Okay, now that we have it dry, we'll add the Shaoxing wine. It's about a teaspoon of oyster sauce, a teaspoon of oil, and about a teaspoon of cornstarch. Okay, now, again, I'm going to use my hands. It's basically the same as the other shortcut method, except that there's no baking soda because, and there's no water because we added the baking soda and the water already and we poured it off. Some people add dark soy sauce or other soy sauce. They add chicken powder or MSG. You can do all that if you like. There it is, your velveted beef, ready for the wok. And this is our shortcut method. So what is the difference here? Well, you could see this one was tenderized with a lot of baking soda and water and rinsed off, and then we marinated. This version, this shortcut method, we put about 1/8 teaspoon of baking soda, but the same marinade ingredients, and we didn't have to rinse this off. And this also now has been going for about an hour. So let's see what the difference is in the stir fries. Off to the wok. What we're going to do now is we're going to cook both versions of this beef, and we're going to cook this dried version first. So I'm going to heat this wok up. So this wok is smoking now. Let's go. Now normally, in the Chinese restaurant, this would be full of oil and I'd be deep frying this. But now instead, at home, we're going to sear this. Going to cook this about 80% done. I want to get a little sear on all sides of the meat because in the oil, you get it all around the meat. Okay, going to put this back into the bowl. Shortcut version of the beef. So we're going to sear this other beef, and if you got a little water like this on here, you probably don't want to pour that in. Try to avoid that. Ready? Here we go. There you go. You got a nice sear, no stick, right? Now you can see this beef is a little bit plumper than the shortcut method, just a little bit. All right, that's good enough. So let's fire it up and cook one at a time. So we're going to add a little bit of oil, add a little garlic. So I'm going to put this sauce right in. That's about a cup of sauce there. I'm going to stir up our cornstarch. So normally I would add the sauce first. I would add the cornstarch right to the sauce, but broccoli has cooled off a little bit. So I'm going to put it back in to heat it up. Get the broccoli heated, and our beef, of course, is still hot. Bring this back up to a boil. Make sure that broccoli is heated through. I do want to get a good boil here. I'm going to add a bunch of that, about half of that. And then I'm going to add, this is the dry, not the dry, the shortcut. I keep saying it dry. Let this cook. Now I'm going to give it a couple of tosses. Okay, I'm going to plate this now. All right. It's a little bit more saucy than I like, but it's a la Sarah. She likes a lot of sauce. That's okay. Plenty of sauce for the rest. All right, let's go give it a shot. Okay, so for this taste test, we've gotten Judy, who is the biggest critic in the family, all right? So we won't tell you which beef is which. The same sauce, same broccoli, everything's the same. The only difference is one of these dishes have been velveted using the shortcut method. And the other dish has been velveted using the water rinsing method, which is what we use in the restaurant. But it's the same beef, that's the only difference, same dish. And let's see. So
Wait, shouldn't you both try the same one first?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
we'll both try the same one first. Okay. All right, get a little piece of broccoli. And a nice big piece of
Yeah,
beef.
it's all about the beef.
It's all about the beef. Gotta have the beef with the broccoli. Let me try this. Very tender.
Wow. Nice.
I'm glad there's a lot of sauce. Because it's good.
Want to try the other one?
Okay, let's try the other one. There is a difference.
There is a difference. This one is slightly tougher. Same piece of beef, right?
It's the same piece of beef. Yes, exactly. Everything was cut with the same piece.
Yeah, it's tougher. This piece is better. It's very good.
You're always going to get variations in the beef. Which version would you rather eat?
This one. Prefer this version. The beef is definitely tender and it's easier to chew. It also has that song, like I don't know how to describe it.
Oh, it's like a snappy flavor, like
Yes.
So it tastes more like a What tastes more like what you would get in the restaurant or a takeout?
I think this one.
And what about this one? What's the difference between? How would you describe this versus that one?
This one is for sure tougher, but somehow this one is more beefy. I feel that it's more beefy. Yeah.
I'm glad that she said that because that is actually the case. This beef is done with the shortcut method, this plate. And this beef is done with the rinse method, where we put lots of water, lots of baking soda, and rinse it off. So you're right on. Now what's interesting is that you said this tasted softer and has more of a snappy texture, kind of like what you get in the takeout restaurants, right? And this one is more beefier. So that is actually true in my opinion as well, I think. So this beef is more processed. You put the baking soda has changed more of the integrity of the beef, and also by rinsing it, and it becomes more tender, more plump, but it loses a little bit of beef flavor. You know, apparently quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
In this has not been rinsed at all, and the flavor is still there.
Right.
It's a little bit tougher, yeah, but it's not tough.
It's
But
not
when
tough,
you
yeah.
compare the two, this is more tender than this one, but this is still tender. That's the difference, folks. So if you want a restaurant style, you can rinse your beef, okay? But if you want it beefier, right, flavor, then use the shortcut method. And convenience as well, because it requires much more steps. And keep in mind, do you want to actually use a flank steak that you paid quite a bit of money for and rinse the beef? Maybe not, but on a chuck steak, it definitely won't be as tender, because chuck steak by nature is a tougher cut of beef. So tougher cut of beef requires a little bit more tenderizing. You got it.
I passed the test.
Well, I don't know about passing the test. We passed the toughest critic on the walks of life. Enjoy this, folks, and hopefully you learned something today. And if you like this video, come to our site and like and subscribe.
Yummy.
Okay, all right, let's go. This is it. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. All right, let's go. Come on. We got to go.